Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Hope you guys are all doing well and staying safe. I'm really excited to be presenting at ImageCon. I wish I could be giving this talk in person, but I'm really glad that the team was able to move it online and we can all still have this experience. So I'm here to talk to you today about a project of mine and how I was able to leverage Cloudinary and some other JAMstack tools to improve the experience. So first of all, a bit of an introduction to myself. My name is Ire, and I'm a front-end developer and UI designer. I'm one of the co-founders of BuyCoins, which is a cryptocurrency exchange based in Nigeria, which is where I'm from and where I usually am, apart from this whole coronavirus situation. So right now I'm actually quarantined in London because of that. I'm also a Google Web expert and Cloudinary media expert, which basically just means I really love using Cloudinary and I really love the web and media in general. I also write a lot on my blog, Bits of Code, and I usually just write articles about front-end development and different things that I'm learning. So in 2006, 73% of websites were reliant on JavaScript for their core functionality. And that just meant that if JavaScript was not enabled in your browser for whatever reason, you would not be able to use the primary function of the majority of websites at the time. And that's even before things like front-end frameworks were really a thing. I think Angular wasn't released until 2010 or something. So I can only imagine that this number is increasing. And occasionally I like to try and just disable JavaScript in my browser and visit different websites and just see what the experience is like. And it's an exercise I would encourage all of you to try just to kind of see, especially in whatever website you're working on, to see how it works. And as you would expect, some websites completely break. They just don't work. Facebook, you can sign in, but once you do sign in, it just shows you this message like JavaScript is required. You can't really do anything about that. Other websites, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, have an even better experience than normal. So this is quite typical of like news websites and media websites where as soon as you land, there's like a million different pop-ups in your face. And without JavaScript, it's like, oh, you can just immediately access the content. And although this reliance has allowed us to build really incredible things, there have also been some downsides. In a lot of cases, performance suffers. So especially when large frameworks are being used for sites that could have been just completely static. Accessibility can become a problem, especially in single-page applications where the controls and the navigation may not be handled properly. And progressive enhancement is usually an afterthought. So instead of starting with a base experience that works for everyone and kind of building up, we usually start with the JavaScript required experience. And only in some cases do we actually bother to work back and see what the experience would be like for people who don't have JavaScript enabled. And this isn't some like witch hunt against JavaScript. And it's not to shame websites that require it as being horrible or anything, because there are very genuine cases where you just need JavaScript. And I think Facebook is actually a good example. Their entire layout and everything on their homepage when you sign in is completely dynamic and it's dependent on the user. So I think it kind of makes sense that you need JavaScript for it to work. Even at BuyCoins, even though our main website is accessible to everyone, we still require JavaScript if you're trying to log in and start actually trading crypto because of the nature of what we're building. So I think this isn't about saying don't ever use JavaScript for anything. I think it's more about saying we can actually use JavaScript and the JAMstack to address a lot of the issues that JavaScript creates. And that's what this talk is about. It's sort of a case study of how I was able to use JAMstack tools like Cloudinary, Puppeteer, Cloudflare to improve the experience of this project for non-JavaScript users. And it all starts with my blog. So as I mentioned, I write a lot of articles about front-end development. And in those articles, I frequently want to reference and display information from CanIUse.com. So what I did was I created this live embed that pulls information from CanIUse's data and displays it in this live interactive embed. So no matter when you come to this article, you will always see the most up-to-date information about that particular feature. And the way it works is that you first just include the script wherever in your document you want. And then where you actually want the embed to show up, you place this bit of code. And I have a website that generates this for you, so you don't have to actually manually add it. But it's basically just made up of a few key things. So first, just a class that lets the script know where the elements are. Then we have this feature ID from CanIUse. And then within that element, we have the fallback data. So what the script will do is swap all of this out for the actual iframe that loads the actual embed information. But as you can imagine, this is also where the problem arises. So if someone were to visit my blog without JavaScript enabled, this is what they'll see, just this text waiting for the script to actually do its thing and swap it out for the iframe. And this isn't just a problem for browsers with JavaScript disabled, which, depending on what you're working on, you may or may not consider a large enough user base for you to be that worried about. But think about slow connections. So even if the embed eventually does load, the user may still have to see that fallback content for a few seconds, or depending on how bad your network is, it could be a significant amount of time. And then there's places where JavaScript just is not available in the first place. So things like emails, I like to send out my articles as emails as well. And the embed was just not something that could be used in that format. And then READMEs, that's also another popular place where you might want to display this kind of information and you just couldn't before. So I was thinking about how I could solve this. Went on a retreat, thought, how am I going to solve this problem? And I came up with a solution that involved leveraging these two tools to try and improve the experience. So I would first take the live HTML embed page and then use Puppeteer, which is a headless browser, to convert it into a screenshot. And then I would host that screenshot on Cloudinary. And then that image could then be used as the fallback instead of just that plain text. So this is what it would look like if instead of the text, you'd see the image, which will then be replaced by the live and interactive embed if or when the users, when the embed itself is actually loaded. So let's see how I was able to implement that. So the first part of this is using Puppeteer to get that screenshot of the embed in the first place. And Puppeteer has to be one of my favorite libraries because it just makes everything so easy. So the first thing we do is just import the Puppeteer node library. Then we create a new browser. And that's essentially just creating a new window in Chrome, right? And the extra settings here is just me setting what I want the dimensions of the window to be. So I just picked 800 by 800 because I know what made sense for the embed. So I just picked something that was pretty simple. Then the next thing, we load a new page, and that's essentially just adding a new tab to your browser window. And then I'm passing in the URL of the page that I want. So I'm referencing this embed URL variable, which is basically just whatever the HTML document for the embed is. And then this network idle 2 setting here just lets Puppeteer know that I want to wait until the page is fully loaded and all the scripts have finished executing before I move on to the next stage. And then finally, we just take a screenshot and close the browser, and it's that simple. So the next part is uploading the image to Cloudinary, which is takes even less code. So first, again, we import the Cloudinary node module and then set up the configuration. And then I'm just using this upload stream method and passing in the screenshot variable that I got from the previous section. And then when the upload is done, we have access to the secure URL on Cloudinary. So now when I'm using that embed code on my blog, instead of this fallback text, I could replace it with an image instead. And even better, what I actually do is use the picture element. And since we're hosting on Cloudinary, we automatically have access to like all the different file types and sizes to make this an even better experience. So I can just put WebP first, put PNG, and if picture element is not supported, just have like a fallback. So now if you were to visit my blog without JavaScript enabled or with a slow connection or via one of the emails, you just see this image here. And as I mentioned, creating one of these is kind of totally abstracted. So you basically just go to this website that I created and you type in what feature that you want to use, and then you add, I don't know what versions you want to display, and then you can add like a fallback screenshot. And then when you click generate, that's when I use Puppeteer to go grab that screenshot and create the fallback content. And then you can just copy and you have like everything there, and you don't have to do any of that yourself. So now we can celebrate, right? Like we've solved the problem, everything is good. We can just close our laptops and be done, right? Kind of, but not really, because that solution kind of just solves like half of the problem. It doesn't really fully solve the problem that I had in mind. So let's kind of just go back. So what happens is you want to use this embed, right? You've written a beautiful article on your blog and you're like, okay, you want to display this live embed on your page. So when you create that embed, the fallback screenshot is taken at that point, right? Which makes it stuck at the time at which you created it, whereas the full experience is live, up-to-date data. And the fallback image could be from days, weeks, months, years ago, depending on when you actually took it. And I felt like this was more of a graceful degradation approach as opposed to a progressive enhancement approach. And I feel like a more progressive enhancement approach would be to try to provide the same information the user is expecting. So I want an image that's essentially of the same value as the interactive embed. So again, I went back to the drawing board to see what I could do. But luckily, I had already had the main parts done. I just kind of needed to take an extra step to get the full experience of what I was trying to create. So the solution I came up with would be to capture a screenshot of all the features possible and do this every single day because I want the data to be most up to date. So I would have an image updated every single day that reflected the state of that particular feature. Then I would provide a URL that the user could use that doesn't change. And then I would use Cloudflare redirects to kind of connect the pieces together. And so that static unchanging URL would be able to reference the updating image. So I would be able to do something like this, like have a URL to just the CSS grid feature. And the result will be an image that will change and update every single day. And whatever date you go and look at that image, it would be the most up-to-date information. So let's do a bit more code to take that extra step and get there. So as with last time, the first step is to capture the screenshots of the embed page, but instead of doing it for just one, we're now going to do it for all of the 488 features on CanIUse.com. So the first thing I would do is just get that list of all the features from the CanIUse database. And it's basically just like a list of IDs. So that's what that features array is going to be. And then I'm looping through each feature and changing the embed URL based on the feature ID. So there's like a different URL to go to for each particular feature. And then the same way we did before, I'm just capturing the screenshots, and then I'm saving it to this screenshots array so that I can use them in the next step. And the next step, again, is to upload those images to Cloudinary. So I'm looping through all the screenshots I got from the previous section and uploading them in the same way. So I'm setting the public ID to just be the same ID as the feature on CanIUse, so everything is kind of connected. And then I'm also just like saving them to this images array, and then I have access to all of the images. So when all the images are uploaded, I get a URL like this for each image. And at this point, I think it's kind of important to break down the URL we get from Cloudinary so we can kind of understand the next phase and why I needed to do that. So the first part is just Cloudinary's domain, nothing that interesting there. Then you have the cloud name, and then you have the resource type, delivery type, and then you have the version number. So this is the most important part to note at this point, because when you upload an image, Cloudinary is going to assign a version number to the image in order to assist with caching. So once you access an image by a particular version number, it's cached. And the next time you want to access that image and you're using that same version number, it'll just return the cached version. But if you change the version number to something you haven't previously accessed it by, it'll just try and get whatever's the latest image with that particular name. And it is possible to access an image without adding a version number at all, but it is also a cached version in the States, and it will still like take a while to update. And a final thing to note is that the version number doesn't have to be the same number that you get when the image is uploaded. It can be basically whatever you want. It's just that, like I mentioned, as soon as you access an image using a version number, that it's cached at that version number. So the next is just like the folder in which the file is stored on your Cloudinary cloud. And then you just have the file name and the extension. So although this is the URL we get when Cloudinary uploads it, what I actually wanted, like I mentioned, is something like this below, where all the details are kind of abstracted from the user. I don't want people to necessarily have to know my Cloudinary cloud name or know exactly what folder it is located in. And what if I wanted to change all of that? I didn't want it to be hard-coded and out there, and I won't be able to change all of these details. And that's where Cloudflare comes in. So I can create a page rule that will create a forwarding page rule rather, that will map a certain URL pattern onto another URL pattern. So I could have something like this where it's my domain name / image / and then a string dot another string, and it will map to this Cloudinary URL, and it will kind of just replace those two like wildcards. The slight problem with this is that, as you can see, the version number is actually hard-coded in the page rule. And that will mean that even if the image itself was being updated, we're always going to be trying to access a certain image at a particular version number. So I could technically do this every single day. Like every time I uploaded a new image, I could go into Cloudinary into Cloudflare and try and manually like update it. But obviously, if it's happening every day, we can't really do that. And so we need to find a way to do this with code, right? And that's kind of like the last part of this. So what I needed to do is use the Cloudflare API to update the version number in the URL redirect every time I upload new images, so once a day. And that part is what's important down here. Like the rest of this, you don't necessarily need to be that worried about. It's just me using the same page rule as before, or the same details of the page rule as before. And the only thing I'm really updating here is that URL. So the URL that we're mapping to. And what you can see I did was, instead of for the version number, what I'm just doing is getting like the current timestamp. And because, like I said, that Cloudinary doesn't necessarily care about the exact version number you're using, you just need to make sure you update it whenever you want the cache to be updated. So that's why I'm just using current timestamp. So now, every time I upload a new image, this number will change. So this is kind of the entirety of everything I run. So first, I'm just getting all the features from CanIUse, as I mentioned. So we just have that array of all the features. Then, as I mentioned, taking the screenshots with Puppeteer. Next, I'm uploading all of those screenshots that were taken to Cloudinary. And then finally, I am updating the page rule on Cloudflare. So, and all of that is just bundled into a job that's scheduled on Heroku to run every single day. So now when you create the embed, it already by default includes that live image as the fallback. So this is an example of the live image you can see, and it's like updating every single day. I do still allow people to create a static image if you do want to capture what the feature set is at a given time, but the default is just to use like the live image. And then you create it, and then you can see you just get this code that has all the different features, and then it's like just the fallback. So now we're done. We can finally celebrate, and everything is great. So thank you. I hope you found this an interesting use case of Cloudinary and the JAMstack. And these are all the links, and you can obviously go and use the embed yourself at caniuse.bitsofcode. And I have links to the GitHub and everything if you want to actually see the code for how I'm running everything. So thank you very much.